Okay, so composition wise, I think I'm just going to try and use this color again for the non-metallic. So just using the anthracite gray as a base, which is a lighter base for the weapons, but in case it's too light, we can still lower the non-metallic here. And I don't want to go for a hyper-realistic non-metallic. I just want a more comic-ish approach. We will see how that looks later. So starting from a rather light blue that I'm later going to shade, and as always with the scale colors, we need a second layer here. Oops, that's not steel, that's probably going to be gold later. So I really want to go for light blue, steel metallics, or non-metallics. I need a darker blue too. So one thing I want to try is just adding a bit of yellow to the midtone. Again, I'm going to go for the Sahara yellow. Right. So I'm going to add some white to that. Okay, so let's add a bit of yellow to the base color. I'm just trying to find a bit of a pattern here that's going to look interesting. So I think I'll go for really light here, up in the corner, then getting darker towards that edge, and then doing the exact opposite over here. Can also start doing this. Also here. Just going to do the same over here. Probably want to keep this a tiny bit darker, so let's see. That's interesting. I think I had a bit of black in the base color there. We will never know. Okay, let's add more white. Tiny bit of yellow maybe. Okay, and I'm going to emphasize that edge straight away, because that's going to reflect a lot of light. Maybe still a bit more of that midtone. And yeah, do this up here a lot darker. Okay, from now on, just adding more white. And again, I'm starting rather light here. Just barely touching the edge on this side, and then as we move to the inside here, I'm putting a bit of, yeah, just a bit more color, and then also just a tiny bit on the other side. That way we are putting a bit more focus here on this corner. Because it's, yeah, I just wanted to catch more light, or paint it like it would catch more light. Then also painting this edge in a similar way, and that is already really light, so we might want to take a middle step here. Right. So just intensifying this gradient. And yeah, it still looks a bit light. No, sorry. Yeah, it looks a bit light overall. So we still have to work a lot more on the contrast. We can put a bit of emphasis on the edges. And one trick that you can do is, when it comes to the gradients, just try to paint these in an inclined direction, and just paint like stripes or strokes, brush strokes. That way it looks like, you know, like the metal has a structure. It's just really thin and a lot of stripes. Right, so again, doing the brush stroke technique here with the midtone. That's maybe a bit too much. Let's see. Take the base color again, tone it down. But yeah, you can see the gradients get better, and even if you see brush strokes, then that just looks like it's in the structure. Of the metal. Basically just glazing over the transition here, the middle transition. You can always do that. So if you are new to painting gradients, you can always just do like the base color and then mix in a bit of white and just fade it out like this maybe. Okay, that wasn't really. Yeah, just mix a few midtones like this. Then you can always go back in and choose from any of those. You know, but with experience you get better at that too. Just noticing how much you mixed in and how much you would need to mix in again. But I also lost a bit of that yellow. I just realized. Definitely want that to be in there. Okay, risk that again. Just adding more white at this point. Okay, and here we want to start a bit wider up here and then just do like smaller dots as we move towards the tip, because it simply is a cylinder that's getting smaller. You also want to mimic that. And we could have painted the other sword right away, but I just want to finish this first. Okay, focus on the edge here. Really don't want to make this edge too thick. But it needs some focus. Okay, so I'm probably going to do the lightest part here. then have the whole thing get a bit darker again towards this side. So do the same here. But that means I have to go back in and fix some parts. Yeah, that's okay. So we kind of ruined the gradient right now. But like I said, that was on purpose. So just cleaning up those gradients right now. Okay, let's just put some white here. Also putting white into this, but I'm probably not going to leave it at that because I'm going to just apply a few layers of color on top of that. That's still going to tone it down. Okay, let's see. So a few glazes of the mid color. Should draw everything together. Alright, so just gradually smoothing this out. I'm not quite sure about the pattern. Oh, okay. Didn't want to go that dark. God damn it. Okay, so that was a bit of wet blending. Also put some darker color here again. Like I said, I want this area to be darker again. Okay, just switching the orientation of these to have them look into the same direction, or just be orientated into the same direction. And down here we want some darker color. So we want the majority of the weapon to be this midtone, like I said. And we're just going to and from these gradients that we have here. And as we see the neat, we go back in and add some lighter color, or some darker color. And again, if you just work with glazes, then that's fine. You're not going to go too intense straight away. And that way you can decide how wide your reflection should be and where the light should go and all that. Just make sure you have some areas that go up to white, so like I have up here, for example. And I'm probably going to stipple in one area down here. Don't want this area to be too, this area of white to be too prominent. Okay. And we can also add a bit of a secondary reflection. And if you feel that's too intense, again, tone it down with a glaze or two. And then to distinguish both reflections, I'm also going to put some darker color between them. So just glazes of darker color. Yeah, so you can decide, you know, are you going to do just one big reflection or two? It's really up to you. If you do two, I do recommend that you are making one a little less intense than the other. But yeah, if you paint the reflection here, then I would totally also highlight that edge and then add a bit of more intense light spot exactly where that is. And down here on that edge, I would probably also do that a bit more intense, but it's below, obviously below this gold rim. Just making that more intense again. So with non-metallic, I feel like one rule that makes everything a tiny bit easier for you, especially if you're not like trying to go for hyper realistic. Just try to follow a simple rule to begin with. Everything that is dark on one side should be light on the opposite side. So for example, here I could do like this and then do another dark area here. I can show you. So that's one of the rules that I follow. Other than that, you are kind of free in what you want to do. You see, when I started painting non-metallic, all I did was just painting one. Hold on, I'm going to show you. Painted a bit more of an extreme non-metallic here. So it's kind of important to go all the way to white on some areas and then follow the pattern of just putting a dark area next to a light area. That's also quite important. And then what I do is I just start, for example, up here, and then I decide, okay, I'm just painting a gradient of light to dark up here, but since this is facing up, and you can always do the whole, okay, I base coated it in black, and then I just hold it into the light, and then I look around a bit, and then I'm going to decide whether which of those is going to be my lightest area, and apparently this one is pretty light. So I'm going to decide, okay, this is my lightest area, and I'm going to start with the lightest part here. So there goes a gradient from light to dark on this side. And then I just do the opposite on all the adjacent, on the areas next to it. So I just decide on what's my starting area, and then I'm trying to get this to look credible. Because realistic is not really, an option here anyway. I mean, you would have to look at an axe. I mean, you could still do it, right? There's people that do it, that paint hyper-realistic, non-metallic. But again, here, this is just to illustrate how it's going to look and so on. So yeah, so just decide on your brightest area and start with that, and then just add the lighter areas next to it. I mean, here this was a bit complicated, obviously. So everything that hits 3 areas next to each other is gonna be a bit complicated, but here I just did the whole, just a lighter reflection here and just made the whole thing a bit darker, if that makes sense. Okay, so like I said, we want some white in the whole thing. That sucks. Okay, we're going to have to fix that with the darker blue later. Okay, then I also decided that this is a part. That's going to be light. Just making this a bit lighter too. Okay, so I think I want to intensify this area again, just a tiny bit. Alright, something that I forgot is back here. This part also should be lighter. Just to continue with what we started back here or down there. I think I'm going to start right away with the glaze, just glazing over everything. Should already make it more coherent and darker. And also more intense and lively. Got to be a little patient here. And then adding a bit more of an opaque layer in certain areas, namely the ones that should be darker. So up here, right at the corner of where the lightest area and the darkest area should meet. Just reshaping the forms here a bit, the shape of the reflections. So that they don't look too boring. So I think I want this to go up a bit more as it approaches the edge. And then maybe we can add like one more line here. So yeah, just some random lines in the rather dark area. Kinda makes the whole thing look interesting. Just make sure that they look somewhat parallel. Maybe this is a bit too overdone. Let's see. Just putting it in line with the rest. Yeah, and then for example, if you are doing a desert base, then you can decide to have the desert color be reflecting also in that color. And then of course there's always the option to go a lot darker. I'm not sure if I want that with this axe. It would still look good, but overall I think I want this axe to be rather light and you know, feel like some light quick steel, whereas these is more like a demonic blade with, yeah, just a lot of crude edges and all that, and where the contrast obviously has a lot bigger impact. Yeah, so I think I'll aim for a bit more contrast by painting these corners darker. And maybe one line here. And we can also add darker lines down here. So yeah, just try to have a few areas where you have lines that don't reach all the way through. So for example, this blue here. I kind of decided that this doesn't reach the end over here. That also adds interest, looks interesting. Yeah. Again, don't be afraid to have some brush strokes in there that are visible. This is exactly how some illustrations work. If you remember, for example, some older comics, they also painted metal, obviously with grays, non-metallic. And yeah, they just employ all these techniques too. And again, I just wanted to end up at 2 reflections, one less light than the other. So this is the main reflection, this is less light. And then just, you know, go to and from the colors and glazes. Definitely takes some patience. And I wouldn't recommend doing it on rank and file stuff. You know, other than maybe if you just want to employ all the contrasting colors. So you could easily just paint some rougher gradients like this by wet blending or something like that, and it would still look okay. This is more towards the showcase finish because there's so many layers. Okay, so I think I'm fine with that. The only thing that doesn't look that awesome yet is this area. But we'll clean that up and then I'm going to see what I'm going to do with it. Probably just going to paint like one reflection here. Okay, let's see. I'm going to start cleaning this up, like I said. Taking this blue that we took for the shadows and adding some black. And I'm just going to start black lining this, or dark line. So when cleaning up, what I do is I try to drag the brush over the area that is not painted yet the most, and just let a few hairs touch the area below. And always keep a damp backup brush around in case something like this happens. But yeah, like that, you have just a thin line touching the area that's supposed to be darker. But again, it's most of this black line is on the area that's going to be later painted gold, so we're actually okay. Yeah, I think I want to intensify this a bit more. So there's some black added to this blue, and I'm just going to start putting 1 or 2 dots here and see how that looks. It should, yeah, it definitely makes the whole thing look a bit more just deeper and richer. Definitely. So I don't want to do that here, but this is, like I said, the darkest area next to the lightest area, so we can risk that. Be painting these black, just so I see the difference. Because right now, the gray and the white base coat, they are interfering a bit. Okay, so that should roughly show what we still have to paint. Looks a bit better with the black. Need to find my painting position again. So I'm going to be painting my lightest area here in the middle of the curve, and then as it curves up I'm going to add a bit more light, and as it curves down I'm going to think about what I'm going to do here, but I'm going to try and paint a bit of a reflection, maybe from the ground or either from the ground or from the gold, so we will see. Okay, so with the mid-tone I'm starting to highlight the edges, and later, so yeah, I'm going over the whole edge here, and later I just reduce the amount of area that I cover with the lighter colors. That should focus on light in this part here. Okay, so as I said, with the lighter color, covering less area on the edge. So you don't just want to paint a gradient on the surface, on the plane, but also on the very edge. Let's go with lighter. And when the transitions are too hard, you can make use of the gradient that you did here, or that we did here, and just go a bit back towards more mid-tone and just apply more layers there, and that helps us fade out the gradients. Right, so we did the same here. So we're just going to take one of the darker shades and also painting over that. That was maybe a bit too dark. Was my white gone? Right, so the blue gives us a bit of an interesting hue, and now we're just moving into the last highlights. That's going to give us the contrast. Yeah, and I'm taking the brush and I'm inclining it somewhat 45 degrees maybe. That way you don't get how to say that, it helps to create the illusion of being reflections because eventually you're going to get a few lines here and there if you're not working super smooth and take care of all the brush strokes that might go off in directions that you didn't want to go at, and that way you can just say, nope, that's actually a reflection line. I wanted that to be there exactly the way it is. Kind of having trouble with this area down here, but again, we're just going to take another layer and that's going to fix it. Right now it looks okay. I always feel the hardest part is to go from this to pure white, simply because white is just so intense. I feel like you have to tone down. Yeah, simply because the white is too intense, or really intense, and you need to mix less of the white in as you would with a color that's of a darker hue. let's set up the white highlights. And now going straight into white. You can dab on the brush on the edges a bit, like that. That just adds more interesting, more variations. And it could just be dents that reflect some of the light directly. It's a good way to not look too regular, to mix it up a bit. Okay, just putting a bit more white into this area. Okay, that's actually something that's going to be gold, but okay, let's do that nonetheless. Just maybe dialing it back a tiny bit. On that transition. Actually, I'm not too worried about that. Probably just going to leave it that way. Maybe not start right down here, because I might want to paint a reflection there. And reflections, color reflections always look better. If you are keeping a bit of a darker area there for that. Okay, also I'm going to keep this side a bit lighter because it's the side that's facing away from the light. Wait, no, I mean a bit darker, obviously, sorry. Okay, and this area down here is a bit of a pain to paint, but we'll still try to somewhat mimic this. Well, where are we? No, actually, I think I'm just going to paint it dark, so we don't have to worry about this too much. The focus will be on the gold here anyway. Okay, then I'm also going to darken this, like I said. Taking a bit of our darkest blue or darker blue. you can see that the contrast is going up. Up here we're being a bit more careful, but I still want to add some blue there, some of the darker blue. And I'm basically doing the same, just putting on glazes layers. The same way as you would highlight, just shading to the other direction. Over here, like I said, this is looking a bit rougher. I want to apply a wash, well, a glaze over all of that. That should drag it together a bit better, and while at the same time increasing contrast. So can dab on a bit more color down here while it's still wet, and it's going to fade out a bit as the pigment creeps into the wet, still wet layer. Okay, then more blue here. Just gradually adding some layers, glazing over. And as you can see over here, we are already, we are still a bit darker than here. So, adding a bit of black still. And adding a bit of black lining, especially below this feature up here. That's going to be gold later. Just want to distinguish that from the rest. Okay, also a bit of blue here. Can blend this together a bit better. Just some on the fly blending here, mixing the colors while they are still wet. So again, doing the opposite as it turns to, turns up here. This plane here turns up again. We have some darker ends up here, and I actually want to have a bit of a lighter end on the opposite side, so blending that in, and then keeping the darker shade right where it is here. regarding contrast, I still want some areas that are even darker, so adding slightly more black here, and we can also add a bit more black here. And then fade it out again. Right, I just want to frame that a bit. So, emphasis on edges, just a slight bit. Again, on this side, we want the lightest area to be here. So we're taking pure white and putting it here, and then fade it out a bit upwards and down, and also this edge up here. Okay, then just double checking. I think I also want some more black here, and notice how I put a really light area, really light plane next to darker again, just to increase contrast again. Since we're already on it, we can also fix a few of these gradients. Okay, putting a bit of darker color here and then just using midtones. The next step is to increase contrast again. So starting at these midtones, I do add glazes of the darker color, of a darker mix, moving into the darker areas. And the idea here is to have a really strong midtone and then darkening the areas of shadow or darkness. And on the other side, increasing the light areas and painting the full reflections and all that. And this way, you have, like I said, an intense midtone that you can work off of, and you don't have to invest that much time into building your midtone with glazes from the darkest layer that you're starting with, and then move into the lightest areas. But like this, you can have your midtone and then just cut the amount of work that you have to do in half by moving to the dark areas and also adding in the lighter areas on the other side. And that cuts out all the layers and also makes it easier to blend these layers, because you don't have that much of a large range that you have to know upfront where to put your highlights before you even get to them. So that way you have the midtone on the area where the midtone should be, and in the middle of that you're going to place your highlights, and upwards and downwards the outer areas are going to be your darkest areas. That also helps a lot with planning where your highlight should go. So here I'm just cleaning up the upper edge of the axe. The rest is more or less finished. At this stage I'm just going to and from and I'm cleaning up some areas that I haven't really done yet. So for example, the handle needs some reflection still. And I'm putting these in the middle of the cylindrical object. So you have to know a bit where your highlights go. But you can do that by looking at reference pictures of metal rods, for example. Okay, so while that is super interesting, it gets a bit hard to follow through, painting the whole area in a credible way. Most of the colors are down. Like I said, the gold is going to be a bit different still. Probably going a bit more yellow than it is now. This is going to stay black, not black, dark blue. Hair is going to go dark blue, and yeah, this is just going to be gold too. I mean, the thing is, once we have the gold down and done, it's going to change a bit still, the impression that we have now. Overall, I think that's set. I just kind of wish there was a few more elements that you could paint red. So yeah, I mean, I could go for a red here, but there's one painter on Instagram that already did that, and I just don't want to straight up copy him.